you want someone to want you the way you want them. So you like test people. You might like upset them or push them, and all you really want them to do is just to like hug you and love you and say, I don't care about what you just did. I just want to be with you. And again, I don't think that's healthy. I don't think that's healthy that we do that. But I think that's a very common trend
Right.
with adoptees and foster youth. So anyone out there that has people in their lives that are adoptees or fosters, like if they push you away, love them even more.
Good to see you, Colt. How are you,
Hey,
man?
Mark.
Thanks for joining me on the Mark Divine Show.
Hey everyone, this is Mark Divine, founder of SealFit and Unbeatable Mind, and I'm super stoked to announce that my new book, Uncommon, is due out from St. Martin's Press this summer, July 16th. And we've launched a pre-order campaign. You can learn more about that at readuncommon.com to try to get early awareness for the book, which I hope will help a lot of people, where I go and do a deep dive on the 5 mountains of personal mastery: physical, mental, emotional, intuitional, and spiritual. Uncommon, simple principles for an extraordinary life. Check it out at readuncommon.com. And thank you for your support and being part of the change that you want to see in this world. Hoo-yah, Divine out.
Hey, Mark, I'm so excited to get to this is twice this year that I got to read into
I know,
this. Is so
right?
cool.
Go ahead.
I'm not at your wonderful, beautiful beach house this time with like the most amazing view ever, but it's like I'm in New Mexico and it's like 29 degrees today. So
Is it
it's
right?
a little bit.
It's funny. I never really think of it getting that cold in New Mexico, but maybe you're up in elevation, right? Where are you at? No.
It's Albuquerque. It's pretty high elevation out here. It is painfully cold today.
No. It is sunny and warm here in San Diego.
Kick me while I'm down.
As always, yeah. We had an incredible Christmas, man. It was just gorgeous. Light breeze, it's about 70 degrees.
Does the water ever get like a different temperature out in San Diego, or does it pretty much stay consistent the whole time?
Well, it's consistently cold, right? So anyone who thinks that they're going to come to San Diego and feel like they're, get that Florida water, no, it rarely gets above low 60s during the summer. And then it'll get down in the mid 50s in the winter. On occasion, there have been times where it got up to like 70. It feels like bathwater, but you don't get the 80-degree water like you get down in Florida or Puerto Rico or out in Hawaii,
Yeah, you definitely have to have a wetsuit if you're going to dive into San Diego water.
Yeah, and the surfers are always putting the rubber on. I mean, it's just, they just expect, if you're going to be in the water for that long, your body just really leaches out that heat pretty quickly.
Yeah, no kidding. Dang.
Yeah. That is cool. It's a beautiful place to live, and so is New Mexico. Like I remember when I was at SEAL Team 3, we did a bunch of training out near Albuquerque. There was a couple, like Kirkland. Is it Kirkland Air Force Base?
Yep.
Yeah.
Kirkland Air Force. I was there
did
today.
A lot of close air support training out there, and did
That's so cool.
Some work with the Air Force Special Ops. It's a really beautiful state.
Yeah, no, New Mexico is great. I really like it. And you've been out to our elk ranch out.
That's right. That was beautiful. I was just going to ask you about that. So I remember the one and only cross-country train ride I took, Sandy and I and our newborn baby. We piled into an Amtrak and kind of rumbled along up the coast. And then I can't remember where I think maybe it was San Francisco. We kind of cut, the East Coast, eastbound leg, and we rambled all the way to Gallup, New Mexico.
That would be
the train stopping at Gallup, and we had all of our camping gear with us because we were going to go up to Durango to camp, and we slip it all off the train, and we're like looking around, like, where's the town? And then your mom was there to pick us up. So it was, thank goodness, we would have been.
That's a bold and fun move. I was at our cabin last weekend, and I had one of my ROTC buddies come out on a train. The train broke down. And it was supposed to be a quick little trip. And in 5 hours, they had to bring out a new engine, swap it out. I ended up picking them at the train at the Amtrak.
Amtrak is midnight. Crazy.
Yeah. So
it sucks up billions of dollars of taxpayers' money. And the thing, barely moved like 20 miles an hour on most tracks. And yeah, ours broke down on the way home. They had to bus us.
No way.
For the final leg.
Are you kidding?
I kid you not.
Oh my gosh.
So
that's awful.
If you're a train fan, I'm sorry, but Amtrak sucks.
That's so funny.
Yeah, that was a beautiful place. I love that your dad was a really neat guy. And I want to talk about what it was like growing up with him, and also adoption, because my son is adopted, and I want to talk about that in this show, if you're okay going there.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that was so cool because we got to Gallup, and it's like desert. You know what I mean? Flat. And I'm like, wow, I don't know why anyone would want to live here. And then we drove up, like it was like 30 or 40 minutes. and just kind of up into this mesa. And suddenly
Yeah.
it's just this beautiful pine trees and it was just stunningly gorgeous. And that's where your dad had this elk farm. He was harvesting the antlers for some medicinal purpose. I forget what it was.
Elk velvet. Yeah. When
Yeah.
the elk antlers have velvet on, they have these real great medical benefits. And so we would cut them off and we would ship them overseas, and they would turn them into medicine. They're very popular with people. And I remember dog lovers, real dog lovers, would like buy elk velvet pills for their dog. That was a big trendy thing. I don't know if that's still trendy, but it was very trendy.
Velvet pills. Yeah, that's a
yeah.
new one. Yeah, they're probably, in some Chinese herbal ingredient, mixtures.
Yeah, we would like ship them off to China. It was like where they would go, and like, yeah, you're absolutely right.
That's amazing. So how much time did you spend up there as a kid? Describe that experience and how valuable, having that experience of being in nature and also being on a farm where you had real responsibilities. Because I think a lot of people, miss that. They just don't have that in the city life or even the urban life that we live in these days.
Yeah, as growing up, I feel like I'm like a little bit of the black sheep of the family, and I've always had this like big city boy vibe. At least growing up, I did. But as I'm getting older, I look back at like, my dad would make us like haul rocks. He'd like build these like like waterfalls in our driveways and things of that nature, and like we would have to go haul rock. And as like a high school, like as a ninth grader, the last thing I wanted to do was go haul rock. It just the
Right.
term just sounds awful. But like I've learned now it's like the most therapeutic thing. I'm not joking you. A few years ago was asked to take care of someone's horse, and like they had this big area in this nice home and a horse, and I would have to shovel manure. Shoveling the horse manure was the most therapeutic thing in the world because like it's so mindless. You don't have to deal with like these dragons you have to slay. It's just doing hard manual work now is like something I dream of. Like doing dishes, like anything like that, cleaning. I am like, that is my therapeutic time now. And I would probably attribute that from having to like do that hard work and having to do that growing up.
Yeah, it's like chop wood, carry water.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Much of a mental training if you allow it to be.
Yeah,
it reminds me of a really famous, not a famous, but a popular kind of Zen story. There was this monastery and this kind of, I guess, not the most intelligent monk showed up in the monastery. And so all the other monks were kind of making fun of him, right? Because he was kind of a hick and, didn't speak real well and everything. So they put him in the kitchen and they're like, okay, we got a job for him. He's going to be the one that just does all our dishes. And this guy just was happy. Like, okay, yeah, I'll do the dishes. And so he just spent every year after year, he just in the kitchen. And what he was doing was saying the rosary while he was doing the dishes, just kind of wax on, wax off.
Oh, beautiful.
Kid, right?
Yeah.
So all these other monks are all full of themselves, full of hubris, thinking, well, they're, pretty special because they're smart. While this guy slowly, just quietly laboring away in the kitchen, just reciting the rosary to himself thousands and thousands of times a day. And 10 years later, he was the head of the monastery.
That's a beautiful story, though.
Isn't that neat?
And
yeah.
I think so many of us get lost into, we could choose happiness or we can choose despair. And like, you can turn in situations like the monk did and like turn it into like the most happiest of. And I know people who dread touching a dish, like growing up and like having the roommates and, going through college and like, it was painful for them. Like their fights broke out because someone didn't want to do a dish. And so like that's a beautiful story.
Happiness is found. You can choose. Happiness is found right where you're at. It's your natural state, right? The only thing standing between you and happiness is your ego. Ego is resistance to happiness. I think that's why that kind of to drop any kind of resistance to physical labor as work is a really beautiful thing because it's a practice. I was fortunate to grow up in upstate New York. The downside is my dad didn't really make it fun. Like your dad was a very positive guy. My dad wasn't the most positive guy. And so a lot of times the work felt a little bit like punishment, but it still learned to appreciate, the solitude of mowing the lawn or, hauling, stuff or chopping the trees up in the Adirondacks.
My dad knew how to use it as a punishment.
Did he?
And then. Yeah, don't be fooled.
That's pretty
It was
funny.
good though.
So you grew up in New Mexico. What age were you adopted? So your mom
That's
and
a
dad were amazing. They adopted a number of kids, didn't they?
that's a great question. It depends on who you ask, which drives me crazy. It probably adds to my woundedness as being an adoptee. So I keep in contact with both families. And so I have my what I would refer to as my biological mom, my adopted mom. And if I ask my biological mom, she'll tell me 1 year. If I tell my adopted mom, she'll tell me a different year. But it
That's
sounds
pretty
like the
funny.
the consensus is about 2 years old. I started
Somewhere
living
in
with this
between.
family.
2 years.
I was born in Tijuana though, and so like I couldn't legally get adopted until I was 7. And so like just for whatever like citizenship or whatever all of that was. So illegally I was adopted at 7, but
Mm-hmm.
I started living with the Baloks at the age of 2.
Okay, so you were very young. Are you a Mexican citizen then?
That is a great question. I definitely have a birth certificate from Mexico. So does that make me a
Hey,
Mexican?
if we ever have to flee America, I'm coming with you, man. That's south.
He's with me.
That's hilarious. I never thought that.
That's so funny. But no, so I kept in contact with both sides of the family throughout the whole, I would always go. My biological mom now lives out in Vermont. I had tons of siblings out in San Diego, close to where you live. Yesterday was a holiday, and so I sent out. I have 14 brothers and sisters total. So I sent out.
God.
It's just like going through each one, like
On both sides, yeah. Now your
But,
brother, you had a brother named Adam who became a SEAL, right?
Correct. And Adam is the only sibling of mine who is a biological brother who was also adopted by the Balok. So he's really kind of a brother on like both ends.
Sides.
Yeah.
He's a brother from both mothers.
He was a brother from both mothers. I'm going to send him this afterwards and I'm going to show him.
I heard a lot about Adam, and I, kind of like through Cozy, your mom tracked, his SEAL career, but I don't think I ever met him. Interestingly enough,
you've never met Adam.
I don't think I've ever met Adam. Now he's out of the SEALs, right? Or is he still active?
He's out of the SEALs, but next time I'm out there, we're gonna have to like do a thing where we all get together, and so that you guys can like find me. But yeah, Adam's great. Adam's one of my closer siblings, and I always like to beat him up now that he's getting a little older, and then I could say that I could beat up a SEAL.
Beat up a Navy SEAL. So sure. That actually makes me kind of laugh knowing you. That's funny. I love it.
He would make me so angry growing up. I remember like being like 8 years old, and he would do all these like Navy SEAL techniques, like twist my arm around my back, and like I get so angry. I got like this tennis racket, and I just started like beating him so bad with it. Like he really knew how to use the Navy SEAL techniques against me.
That's funny.
Keep me in check.
Now you've been very kind of open, transparent, I should say, about the challenges of adoption, and I can share that I know that my son, who we adopted at birth from Hawaii, so he's roughly 25% Hawaiian. He's got a bunch of Cheyenne Arapaho in him, and the rest Texan, which is a country in itself, of course.
Yeah,
the country of Texas. At any rate, you would think that, like when he opened his eyes and the nurse handed him to a person, it was my wife, Sandy, and then me. But he still has abandonment issues, right? Or he's got trauma associated with his adoption. And, he's been going to therapy for years. So I really applaud him. Like, his generation, now he's 24, like it's very different than mine. Like I had to find therapy through, just basically kicking myself in the jimmy so many times. And then marrying a therapist who's like, no, we're not doing this anymore. It's like, okay. 32 years old. I'm like, okay. But my son's been going to therapy, for like 5 years. So he started in his late teens, and he's working through trying to figure out, like, it affects his self-confidence and his willingness to really put himself out there, which is interesting because you are awesome at putting yourself out there in a big way, risking kind of the ridicule and failure that comes from being a media person. I'm curious, like, what was it like for you, and what have you done to overcome some of the issues, and what are some of the like strategies that an adopted person who's listening might be like, oh, that could be useful for me?
No, absolutely. First off, I want to commend you and Sandy so much for adopting.
It's an extraordinary experience, by the way. I wouldn't change anything.
Absolutely. I'm hoping to adopt one day. it's unfortunate that adoption has to occur. It's very heartbreaking. You know, I don't know if this is too bold of a thing to say here, but like every child has a right to their biological mom and their biological dad. We've kind of stripped that away from children. And like there are always outliers in any situations. And you know, people might be able to be like, oh, like my friend's adopted and they have no issues and like all of that. That's fine. Like that's beautiful. Like that's amazing. But like all the studies and all the research show that like a child's best chance of success is when they're brought up by their biological mom and biological dad. And I didn't have that luxury. Your son didn't have that luxury. And I don't want to discredit adopting at all. Like adopting is so important.
The only thing that could negate that is if the biological mom and dad are so dysfunctional that it would have, you know, that it would be a negative influence, right? So,
Correct. Yeah, correct. And so like my biological mom, she knew that I would be brought up in a better life with the Baloks than if she continued to raise me where she was at. So she made a wise move, right? Like it was just unfortunate that had to occur.
Right.
But you said the word abandonment, and like I live on the word abandonment. I'm so fascinated by it. So when I find other people who are adopted or in the foster care system, without me even bringing it out of them, they'll say the word human connection. And I'm like, that's so interesting that you said that word. Like, why did you say that? Like most people don't just randomly tell me that word. And it's just, we're so hurt. I don't know. I don't know what it is. Like, I wish and I'm sure like there's like good information out there of like what actually causes the adoptee to like suffer this internal wound.
What is that experience? Because I don't have that experience. So I want to try to understand my son better. Like, what is that experience?
Yeah. You want someone to want you the way you want them. And you've kind of concluded, or you even like test people that they can't hold up to it. Right. And so like, I will do things, and like I think a lot of us do, a lot of like us adoptees, where it's like we want to test how someone loves us. Like we were someone who the people who should have loved us most weren't there for us. Like, so I'm so wounded, and how do I test that? Like you just want that. You want that, and you crave it so bad, and you do anything for it. So you like test people. You might like upset them or push them, and all you really want them to do is just to like hug you and love you and say, I don't care about what you just did. I just want to be with you. And the response that we get from people tend to not be that. They tend to push us even further away. They punish us, or they kind of hold their love back. And that is the last thing for anyone out there that's trying to work with like adoption or foster. I always tell them that's the last thing that you want to do.
Right.
You want to, I have this friend who's over at West Point, and he had this roommate who sounded like he went through some of these issues. And he was explaining how his roommate was like, I'm not going to live with you. I'm going to move out and live with someone else. And my friend Gabe was like, how do I respond to that? And I said, you go to him and say, I don't care if you asking me to move out. I'm living with you next year. Like that's the response that you should give to people when us adoptees or us wounded people, when we push away, like we're like, you know, I'm going to go do my own thing. Or I'm going to move out, or I'm not going to see you for Christmas, or whatever that is. Right. Like we all tend to like push someone.
Push away. Yeah.
And then when people say, okay, well, that's what he said, I'm going to listen to what his word said. Like, no, like listen to the nonverbals. I think that's a big thing. In college, I studied communication, and there's an actual class called nonverbal communication. And just that like nonverbals mean so much more than a lot of times than the actual words that come out of our mouth. You know, we always hear I'm fine. And you're like, no, you're not fine. Like clearly you're not fine.
That's an acronym for fucked up, insecure, neurotic, and emotionally unavailable.
Yes. But like someone like one of my sisters, she's always like, well, Colt said this. And it's like, that's not what I'm really saying. Like what I'm really saying is like, I'm hurt. I want it to be accepted. I want to be known. I want to be loved. That's what I really want. And I want you to prove it to me. And again, I don't think that's healthy. I don't think that's healthy that we do that. But I think that's a very common trend with adoptees and foster youth. So anyone out there that has people in their lives that are adoptees or fosters, like if they push you away, love them even more. Like that's kind of like maybe like what I would encourage there.
Push them away, pull them closer.
Yes. I'm curious with your son, like you said, like putting yourself out there. I don't know where that drive has come from. You know, I don't know though. I always remember Ellen DeGeneres giving the Oscar speech, and in their Oscar speech, he said something like, the most important thing in life is family, friends, love. And if you don't have any of those things, well, you probably end up in the showbiz. And like, I find that like pretty comical, because I think that's very true. Like I think, people like me, we seek applause, we seek approval, we seek to know that we're good or we're loved or whatever that is. So I think that's probably a drive of why I put myself out there so much. But I'm curious with your son, like, it sounds like there's like a self-worth or self
Yeah, like he is not that at all. Like he does not, like he's an incredible photographer, but he just simply won't like put his pictures on Instagram. I mean, or try to kind of grow his any type of following. He doesn't need that, doesn't want that.
is he embarrassed? Is he
I think he's yeah, he's afraid of, I don't know, it sounds trite to say afraid of failure because everyone is, but of the criticism or of not being, he doesn't want to, again, I'm just purely guesstimating here because I'm not inside his head.
correct?
But he does have a pretty big fear of being critiqued. Like a couple examples, or just he's got a strong resistance to feedback, especially if it could be negative.
Does he
Right?
giving good feedback is fine? Like that's
yeah,
not
oh
an
yeah,
issue.
he's fine with
It's
that.
strictly getting
a couple data points. Like I've tried everything with him. I did a lot of things with him as a father. One of them, of course, is Boy Scouts, because that's what we do. And I also did adventure guides where we went camp. We had a blast with that. But with adventure guides, it used to be called Indian guides. Of course, that's now politically incorrect, so we changed it to adventure guides through the YMCA. And it's like they have father-son camping trips, and they have father-daughter. But there's no like striving to be better than somebody else. Like in the Boy Scouts, you can get your ranks and you become an Eagle Scout.
Eagle Scout, yeah.
So there's this like pecking order hierarchy. He is, of course, he's Hawaiian. He's like so anti-hierarchy, anti kind of pecking order. So I did try Boy Scouts, and that's when I learned, like, oh, Devin is not motivated by merit badges.
Just doesn't have that drive. Yeah.
No, and we went to the camp out jamboree, and I think he begged me to stay, and I said, well, Devin, I'll stay for the first night. Then we'll see how you are tomorrow, buddy. I think it'll be fine. He's like, oh, and he was in a separate tent in the middle of the night. I hear this rattling outside, and I peek outside my tent, and he had dragged his chair out in front of my tent and was like crashing his sleep bag right in front of my tent. In a
really?
Chair. Yeah. And so I went outside, and the troop leader, who was a friend of mine, had noticed what was going on. So he came up to me. We thought Devin was asleep. He came up to me. He's like, Mark, you know what? We've seen this kind of thing before. Just leave him and get in your car and go right now. Just go. And he'll be fine. There'll be a little bit of an issue in the morning, but once he gets swept up in the events of the day, he'll be fine. And I remember listening to that, and I'm like, that just feels awful. I could never do that to Devin. And I smiled at him, I'll think about it, Greg. And then he walked away, and I walked back toward my tent, and Devin goes, I heard what you were talking about. I said, Devin, let's go. Pack your up. We're getting out of here. And as we're driving away, he turns to me and goes, Dad, he goes, I will always trust you to have my back, to take care of me. Because he goes, I thought you were going to leave me with Greg. The fact that you didn't even consider it was awesome, was huge for me. Isn't that cool?
That's a beautiful moment right there for like, as like, listening and putting myself into Devin's shoes there. I'm like, I was terrified where the story was going to go. And if you were going to leave him, and I was like, oh no, Dad, right? Don't go.
Well, that was one of the many times in my life where my spirit just said, no, there wasn't any kind of active thought consideration. There was just a solid boom. No, I've had that a few times in my life. It's just awesome, right? Like you realize that the ego is not in charge. We mistake it for being in charge sometimes. And whenever you give it too much power, things usually go awry, as it did in my life. I want to come back to my son, but since we're on this point of, what you would call intuition, but it's your higher self just slamming the door shut or swinging it wide open. You got no choice but to go through or to stop. I've told these two stories are really interesting, but when I was 17, I went in popped a hernia, trying to impress my dad by trying to lift this massive log onto this wood splitter.
Oh, that sounds so painful.
Oh, and I popped this hernia, and I was like, So I went to the hospital, of course, and around 2 weeks before, I had this kind of growth pop out in my leg. I'm like, oh, that doesn't look normal. I didn't tell anyone about it, but as I was getting the anesthesia for the hernia, I said, hey, doc, can you guys take a look at this thing when I'm under? And he's like, oh, okay. So a day later, I'm like chasing the nurses around the hospital, healing up from the hernia like a champion. And I get trotted into this room by the doctor and my parents. And the doctor says, sit down. We got something to talk to you about. I'm like, yeah, I'm feeling pretty good. Because yeah, the thing on your leg, well, it's melanoma cancer and it's stage 4. And told me a little bit about what that was. And we've scheduled an operation in an hour to take out your lymph nodes so it doesn't spread. And in that instant, I had that same experience. No, this overwhelming feeling. It wasn't a voice in my head. It was just this overwhelming feeling of no.
No to what?
No, that is wrong. That doctor is wrong.
You don't want to accept that.
Yeah, it wasn't my ego. I knew he was wrong. And so it freaked them out because I said, I'm not doing that surgery. And I'm 17. My mom and of course they could have forced me, but my mom and dad, fortunately, were like, okay. And I said, no, I want second, third, fourth opinions. I said, that's not true. How do you know? You don't know anything about that. I said, I know it's not true.
Yeah.
So they relented on the surgery and they sent the biopsy out to a bunch of other places like Mass General and overseas and whatnot. And I had to wait for months because that was a snail mail day, back in whatever it was, 17, how old was it? 1979 or 80 or something like that. And during that time, that was the weirdest period of my life because apparently they had told my parents that with this 4th stage and without the dissection of my lymph nodes, which would have stopped, that I had probably less than 6 months to live. And so my parents, in their infinite unwisdom, started leaking that news, but they didn't tell me.
You were the last one to find out.
Well, I found out because the stream of cars coming over to my house, and the girls getting out just sobbing and like hugging me. And I'm like, what the hell is going on here?
That's bizarre.
Isn't that bizarre? But the main point, not about my parents' awesome wisdom. It was about that. It was about that soul force that just said, no, that's wrong. And sure enough, when the biopsies came back, it was interesting because two said, no, definitely not. One said we're uncertain. And one said they thought it was melanoma. So I was like, well, that's, that pretty much proves me right. And let's settle the case there. I told my parents, I'm not doing anything else about it. If I die, I die. And I was fine.
That's crazy. I mean, that's just so like, I mean, we just trust doctors with our lives and that like,
I know.
So
trust your intuition. If you have if someone says you got cancer and you don't think you have it, you better, if your spirit says you don't have it, it's very rare. Like I really did not have it. Like I didn't, it was a complete mistake, misdiagnosis. It was something that happens in, teenagers when you go through a growth spurt and hormones are triggering all sorts of stuff. And it triggered a growth that had similarities to melanoma, but it wasn't malignant, and the doctors misdiagnosed it.
Dang.
No, well, another quick. I want to get back to the other subject, but because trust plays a big part in this. Like right then, I just did something where I knew that it had to be done, but it wasn't my ego. It was kind of like I just trusted in my son, and it built great trust between myself. So when you trust yourself, it allows you to trust others, and then it builds trust between others. And it's kind of what you were saying. Like if someone is pushing you away, what they're really saying is they don't trust themselves to be close to you. And so what you can do is trust yourself to pull them closer and say, yeah, I got you regardless of what's happening. You're okay. We got this together. You know what I mean? I think that's what I've tried to be with my son. I've just tried to be, there's no perfect fatherhood. All I can do is be perfect with him in each moment. That moment said, let's get up and leave this Boy Scout Jamboree. There are other moments where I wasn't so perfect because I was trying to impose my will on him. And, that doesn't go so well with my son. Super stoked to have DUER as a sponsor of the Mark Divine Show. I love these jeans. They're nothing like any other jeans I've ever had. They're super comfortable, super flexible. They're almost like wearing sports apparel. These are a game changer. So whenever I reach for my jeans, I look for the DUER first, and I'm super stoked when I've got a clean pair to wear. You're going to love them too. Check them out at shopduer.com. That's shopduer.com. And use the URL shopduer.com/divine, D-I-V-A-N-E, to get 20% off your order. Site-wide, any of their products. They got a lot of great products, including their jeans, but I highly recommend you check out their jeans. They're awesome. Shopduer.com/divine. Check it out today. Hoo-yah.
Hi, Mark Divine here from SealFit. After 2 years of development, I'm super stoked to announce the launch of SealFit supplements and our first product, SealFit ElectroGreens. This is the highest quality organic greens you can find, combined with electrolytes into one powerful supplement. Take with 8 ounces of water in the morning or add to your smoothie to get your day kicked off right with the proper nutritional supplementation and hydration support. And you can also use it as a pick-me-up booster during the day or after a workout. It dissolves immediately, and believe it or not, it tastes great. I've had many testimonials already saying it's the best tasting greens that they have ever tried. So hoo-yah, SealFitSupplements.com, or you can find it on Amazon by searching for SealFit ElectroGreens. Hoo-yah. Let's do this. Divine out. That is delicious.
I love what you said that there's no perfect parent. I think like that is something that a lot of people I recognize with a lot of people I interview. And I mean, we all hold grudges towards our parents, and that does break my heart. We all expect that there's this perfect mom and dad out there. And, you know, I find it interesting with my adoption. I had a couple biological siblings who were very jealous and angry at me that I was the one that got adopted and that they weren't the ones that were given up for adoption, the ones that were a little older than me. And so it's crazy how, I don't know, the grass is greener on the other side, but that we all just, I don't know, we're all so angry at our parents. And, you know, it makes me sad, you know, with a couple of those siblings. I'm like, she's doing the best she can, you know, nature, nurture, we're all who we are. And so like, why are we so angry? Like, yes, like it's not perfect, but like, don't be angry, you know, love them back.
Back to my comment earlier about the only thing standing between you and happiness is your ego. It's actually pretty normal as a stage of development to blame your parents, but you'll never grow beyond that stage until you can forgive your parents and just accept them for who they are. Some people, they never get there. Most people probably never get there.
Yeah.
But it's so important. If you want to truly evolve as a human being, you have to accept everything as it is and forgive everything and everyone, starting with yourself. And then once you get there, and it's a continuous practice or process, then you just start to remove all these ideas about the way things should be, and you're able to be okay with just the way things are.
Yeah.
And that's where you find the happiness, when you're like, oh, this is the way it is because it is. Isn't it cool?
Yeah. Yeah. I have a spiritual, so when I was out in California, I have a spiritual director. My spiritual director's in Santa Monica, and he's like kind of the priest to a lot of people in Hollywood. He, like Mark Wahlberg, Arnold Schwarzenegger, he married Tom Brady. He's just like this really great guy. And he told
he married Tom Brady, or he was the officiator of the
yeah. Tom Brady got his first marriage was at his church. It was cool.
Got it. That's cool.
But he always says that suffering is a gift, and I always think of that. I always go back to that, because when he had told me that, it hit me pretty hard. I was like, a gift? Like, that doesn't sound right. I can understand like go get through suffering, but suffering is a gift, and that's a beautiful way of just looking at life, and how any suffering we go through, we can really use that as an opportunity to become something. I almost like, and not that I'm like telling people to go out and look for it, but like the thing that I've been really reflecting on lately is how do you be a fun leader within my team, like as a business leader in the worst situations? And then also, how can I be fun, the funnest Colt I can be when I'm feeling the most lonely, like the most loneliness and the most abandoned? Because I think that's also really hard. And now it's almost like a little game for me. I'm like, okay,
that's great.
Like,
I love that game.
I'm gonna, I love that game.
Yeah.
I haven't perfected it yet.
We call it, feed the courage wolf. Whatever the circumstances, the harder it is to maintain a positive relationship with it, which is what you're saying. You create this little game to have a positive relationship with what's going on, and so that you can show up as a positive leader and all people benefit, including yourself. So for us, we call that feeding the courage wolf. The two wolves, the wolf of fear lives in your head and the wolf of courage lives in your heart. And if you feed the guy in the head, he's going to get stronger. He's going to keep getting stronger. And what feeds the wolf in the head? Fear and thoughts of can't or shouldn't or couldn't, right? All of those lack-based thoughts. And these things get conditioned into us at a very young age. And then we reinforce them because we keep feeding that fear wolf until the fear wolf wins, right? And that's from the Native American story with the elders telling the kids about these two wolves that are vying for attention, the fear wolf in the head and the courage wolf in the heart. One of the kids says, well, these wolves are like fighting, like which one wins? And the elder says, that's a good question. The one you feed the most.
Yeah.
So in order to stop feeding the fear wolf, you literally just have to ignore it, right? You can't fight it because it'll bite you. If you try to fight the fear in your head, you exacerbate it because that's, that which you put attention to will grow. And the more attention, the more it'll grow, even if it's that what you don't want. So we say is in order to feed the courage wolf, first you starve the fear wolf by just turning your back on it.
Yeah.
And then you find opportunities to feed courage. And courage literally means heart. And so acts of service, selfless acts of kindness and gratitude and keeping a gratitude journal and then learning to quite literally in simplest form, talk to yourself kindly. And so we come up with all these mantras that are really fun and kind of silly, like what the mantra that got me through SEAL training. It's feeling good. I'm looking good. I ought to be in Hollywood. That was a way for me to feed the courage wolf. Isn't that cool?
I love that. I'm really curious on this real quick. So for me, I feel like I've done pretty well with like fear, just my own personal fear with like me being able to do things like I can speak in front of 3,000 people, like doing those types of things. I'm like, cool, I got it. What I fear, or I feel like where fear comes in is like when you're doing something great or building a team, like you have to have others. You have to have other people. And my fear is them not performing, not so me not performing. And I wonder if like you feel that maybe it's like with your son, like maybe it's like I have a fear that he will never love me the way that I love him. It's like a fear of the other person, but like, is that really our own? Like, how does that work when it's like, it feels like it's not so much like you're I feel like the fear master, right? Like, I feel like, so you don't have fear that you can't do X, Y, Z with your son. Like if you had an X, like you knew the exact answer to what to do to motivate your son or have your son have more self-worth, you would do it. You have no fear of doing it. If it's hugging him, if it's telling him a certain I love you, whatever that is, you have that. But it's like I think you might have a fear that he won't receive it or he won't. And so, what do you do in that situation where the fear is like another person?
First of all, Navy SEALs, right? Like we work a lot with fear and courage, and what I've learned is it's very easy to get stuck in the language, right? Because language then becomes real, even though it's not real. Words only point to an experience. And so when you say fear and when I say fear, they're pointing to different experiences. And you have a different relationship to fear than I have. And so it doesn't mean the same thing. So I like to not use words like fear. Like I don't fear that my son is going to be this way or that way, or I won't love me the way I love him. I don't believe in that word in that way. So what I can say is that I have a vision for my son that I'm optimistic,
hopeful for,
that he will fulfill someday, that he will find his purpose, that he'll courageously go out in the world and fulfill it and overcome resistance and grow through overcoming that resistance on his own hero's journey. Like I am optimistic, and I hold that. I visualize him doing that, and I pray that he'll do that, and I hold the space for him to do that, and I try to remove all obstacles so they can do that. But I can't force him to do that. I can't tell them what to do. I'm not going to kick them out of the house, say, go, you're on your own until you know, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
I just don't believe in all that. I think that those are stories that may have worked at one point for some people or for culture, but you know, they certainly aren't going to work for my son, nor my wife and I. SEALs have to redefine their relationship with fear. And so, you know, standing on the edge of a parachute jump, I've used this example before. Most people are terrified. And in the first time I did it, actually the fourth time I did it, I was terrified. The first 3 times I was like, woo! But then, and then my third free fall jump, we were out in the California desert, and this SBS plane had just come in from the East Coast, from Dover, and they're jumping in. They're going to do their training out there because it's the best place in the world to do free fall training. And a guy had a malfunctioned streamer, and he burned in, right? And so we're sitting there. We're just finished our third jump. We watched this poor British guy burn in, bless his soul. And we wait while the little ambulance comes in and then pulls him out. And the instructors say, okay, back in the plane. We got one more jump for the day. And we're like, so that was fear, right? I felt fear there. But then, you know, we had another 50 jumps to do over the next 2 weeks. And over time, with that repetition and realizing that everything's going to be okay. You know, I've got tons of training, tons of opportunities to clear malfunctions. You know, the statistical likelihood of that happening to me is, you know, very, very low. And if it does, it's my time to go. Anyways, so then standing on the edge of that jump or that ramp, what used to be experienced as fear, like butterflies in my stomach and my heart racing, and, you know, that intense like focus became anticipation.
Yeah.
Right. It became professional focus. Like, this jump is necessary for me to improve my skills as a Navy SEAL. So I'm looking forward to it, you know, the same sensation, just different relationship to it. That's how SEALs overcome fear. You know, same thing with the reason our training is so incredibly realistic and intense, and we lose more people in training than, generally speaking, we do in operating. I can't say that for, you know, full on war, because war was, you know, tricky, right? We did some casualties in war that were probably unnecessary, you know, but came because of accidents and deception. You know what I mean? Anyways, we don't have to go down that rabbit hole. The training is relentless and repetitive and realistic. The 3 R's, right? Relentless, repetitive, and realistic. I just made that up. So that by the time you get to combat, it's like you've been there before. You've had this relentless, realistic, and repetitive training that is like no different. The only thing that's different in combat is that the enemy is really trying to kill you this time. Whereas in training, you know, they're not really trying to kill you, but they're still real bullets, you know? And so the relationship with fear of combat goes away too. And you just become this utter professional. And then that's when you layer on the tools that we call Unbeatable Mind, which you now teach the SEAL students, of the breath control, tactical breathing, box breathing, feeding the courage wolf, and maintaining the image of what victory looks like, and keeping radically focused on the smallest tasks you can, daisy chained in that link toward the mission success. Those are what we call the big 4 skills. You bring those in and you put them on top of all the tactical training that we do as a team. And that's why SEALs are unstoppable.
When was the last time you've experienced fear? What caused it?
You mean like fear of, I think that it's less and less. Like, I used to experience fear over loss of my body, which you would call death, right?
Like aging?
No, like maybe when I was 30, I was hiking up Whiteface Mountain, the Adirondacks, and we were going up off trail. So we went up this scar. It's called Whiteface because it has this big scar that runs down where all the land or the trees and soil got stripped off. And so my friend Wynn and I were kind of like scampering up this, and we came to this like sheer cliff that we couldn't go around. It was so thick. We didn't think we could go around. And there was a little ledge. We couldn't get around one side, but on the other side we saw a spot. That's what it was. And a little ledge. And so Wynn was an experienced rock climber. So he kind of like scurried across that ledge, and it's my turn. So I go on that ledge, and I'm like, my heart is racing. I felt that same kind of energy as I did during that 4th parachute jump. But I was fine, right? I was fine. I was like, oh, I got this, I'm breathing. But then I get toward the end and I just feel myself starting to float away from the wall. Like I had lost that 3 points of contact that you need to maintain. Like, I'm like, oh. And right there, I'm like, I am falling. And I was still calm enough. I look over to Win. I said, Win. And he looked at me and he saw my hands had left the rock and he just grabbed my hand and pushed it back to the rock. And there I was. I found my balance again and I scurried off.
That's terrifying.
In that moment, I felt fear because I was like, I'm going to die. Right? There's nothing that's going to save me here.
I felt
but
fear
I look over,
hearing that.
There's Win.
Oh my gosh.
I think that's the last time. And I can't tell you how many times in the SEALs where things were just not going my way. But I didn't feel that kind of fear, right? Because I always felt like there was someone there. And there was, like, Win was there for me. Like, consciousness was there to save me in that situation. In the SEALs, I had other situations that were, it was either a spirit guide or a guardian or just my higher self that saved my ass. And you'll hear a lot of special operators talk like that. Like, there's no reason that you should be alive, but you are, and you knew that you were going to survive.
Yeah.
Because something just said, this is not your time to die. I had a parachute accident like that. I had a situation on the range where I was going to shoot on the range, and I felt as if someone put a hand on my shoulder and said, stop. And I just stopped in my tracks, and right behind me, one of my teammates had an accidental discharge, and the bullet just went,
oh my
gosh,
God,
right by my right ear. If I had taken that next step, it would have gone right in the back of my head. I've said this before in this podcast, but those situations, when they happen, you can blow them off and be like, oh, that's, curious. Or you can be like, oh, yeah, thank you. Because it helps you see that there's more to this life than meets the eye.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that.
I
think a lot of us discredit just a lot of those situations in our lives. Like, that's crazy. Like the hand touch your shoulder and like you felt someone say stop. Like, that is a remarkable experience.
It's very similar. That, in fact, that was the other story I was going to tell earlier, similar to that no that I got when the doctor said, you're going to go get surgery to take out your lymph nodes. If I had done that, I never would have been a Navy SEAL. I never would have, we wouldn't be having this conversation, right?
That's good intuition. That's impressive. Yeah. That's real intuition that you heard there.
Yeah.
Someone like me would have just been like, doctor, I trust you.
But there's got to be times in your life where you've had that kind of real strong, like it's such a hell yes, you can't even think of any other action, right?
I probably could say that happens a lot of times with like dealing with people and like how to respond maybe intuitively, and like the books say to do this, and I'm like, I'm really sure that I should do this right now and not do what the books say. That's probably as close as I get. Right. I don't have any life or death stories of that, but maybe one day. I don't know. I don't know if I want that. I'll trust you.
You've got some pretty big ambitions with the Colt Balok Show. So the bigger you put yourself out there, usually the bigger you get kicked in the jimmy. So stand by.
I'll keep you posted when it happens.
Let me know when you want some help feeding the courage wolf, because I'll help you out.
Mark, thank you so much for taking the time. It's so good to chat with you.
Yeah, it's been amazing. Tell us before we leave. Tell us about your show and about where you're going with it.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going really strong into 2024. We're really excited about it with a few of the segments that we're doing. Anyone listening that wants to kind of follow us along, we have a newsletter that we do called the 3 Qs for Weekly Success that
I get it. I love it.
My writer
awesome.
created, ended up being one of the biggest hits. We've gotten more feedback and more growth in that than anything. It's one of the most exciting things that we do. If anyone listening, please go check out our newsletter. We do a quote we're pondering, a qualm that we're going through, and then kind of a question to leave you with. And then Facebook is where you can really kind of follow us as well. We're currently the fastest growing talk show on Facebook. That's a big milestone for us, and we're just taking it day by day. I think right now, my webmaster actually told me this, and I've been kind of really living by it. I just find it brilliant. And I asked him, like, hey, do you plan on being like a CEO one day? Because I just find you absolutely just remarkable. And he said, and like, to what your dream job is. He's like, I don't have a dream job. He's like, I just know that if I say yes, God's going to put me in a leadership role. I don't know where that's going to be. I just know that's going to happen. And it's
Nice.
really about just saying yes and letting go. And I think that's kind of where I'm at right now, where it's like, I've always had this, God's placed this on my heart to go in the entertainment industry and to do something in entertainment. And so I'm just saying yes and seeing where God takes it. And right now, there's a lot of fun things in the work. This is the funnest part of my life right now. That's a little bit about our show and what we're doing.
That's cool. Well, I love your interview style is great because you're just very present. Like, even this conversation is great. And people say that about me. It's like, I'm not in my head. I don't have like lengthy notes. I don't have a strategy. I don't have pre-planned questions.
Yeah.
I don't like to do that. Not to say there isn't some preparation. It's useful to know, but I already knew you. So that's easy, right? But you're like that. Like, you're very present and spontaneous. And I don't feel like any separation between us. And I know that spiritually there is not. But, even oftentimes, like, I'm interviewing the latest author, and the author is pretty in love with his or her, concepts. And so they're going to make sure those concepts get heard. And so it tends to be like one directional interviewing. And I don't like that. And I'm going to start doing less and less of those and more just conversations like this where we get to share together.
Yeah.
Or I'll do solo cast too. Do you ever do any like solo type things for your show? Or do you always have interviews?
As far as video goes, I mean, I think our newsletter we sent out is probably as solo as it gets.
That's true.
I just am so fascinated by other people. You're one, like, just good presence here, but like, I don't know if it's like you see God in every person or whatever it is that I've adopted. And it's just like, you can't be bored with the other person while you're talking. I'm just like, looking at your face, your mannerisms, your smile, then I'm hearing the words that are coming out of your mouth. And I'm like this guy like has had so much experience. And like, it's like, how are you not fascinated by someone when you like are hearing all the things coming out? And so like, then at that point,
That's
I just
awesome.
had such genuine curiosity that I'm like, when was the last time you experienced fear? And like, oh my gosh, like what, like you just want to know the person because you just are, I don't know. I don't know. I appreciate your compliment. But you make it very easy.
That's a great quality. I love that.
I'm really big on that. There's not a single boring person in the world.
Yeah.
Like you're a boring person if you think there's a boring person in the world. And so like, that's kind of like a motto that I think I live by.
You've got a statement here that I wrote down. It says, you want everybody to become somebody that makes everybody feel like somebody.
That's a goal of mine. I literally will in my daily prayers will be like, please let me be someone that makes, I love that expression, that makes everyone feel like they're somebody. And I don't know if that goes back to my adoption and my woundedness, but I will tell you, you will become the most popular person in the room if any listener out there adopts that. And the other caveat that I'll add to that is everyone needs you, no matter how confident they see you. Everyone needs you, no matter how confident they may seem.
Yeah, I love that. All right. ColtBalok.com, Colt Balok Show.
Yes.
Man, it's great to connect with you and do this. Thanks so much.
Mark, thank you so much for having me on. And again, next time I'm out there, I'm totally we totally need to get together, and I'm excited just to learn more from you and thank you for being so supportive and everything that you've done for my life. That's I literally say it takes an army to get me to where I need to go. And like people like you are genuinely making it happen. So thank you from the bottom of my heart.